New information shows how police used genealogy websites to try to identify the notorious Golden State Killer.
Decades-old serial killer case out in California. Police say they've now arrested the man known as the Golden State Killer.
You will forever be known as a repulsive coward who hid behind a mask of evil. The devil can keep you company in your prison cell as he gnaws away at whatever soul you have left, at whatever life you have left.
A dark figure moves silently through suburban neighborhood as California sleeps. The sound of a door being forced open, heavy breathing behind a ski mask, the terrifying click of a gun's hammer being pulled back. For over a decade, this phantom stalked through the night, leaving behind a trail of trauma, death, and police reports that would pile up by the hundreds. From 1974 to 1986, the state of California lived under the terror of one of the most notorious predators in American history. A man who would attack over 50 women, murder at least 13 people, and burglaries more than 120 homes across multiple counties and jurisdictions. Police knew him by many names: the Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker. But the world would come to know him as the Golden State Killer, a monster who seemed to vanish without a trace, leaving detectives baffled for decades. Today we're exploring the case that redefined cold case investigations forever. After more than 40 years of freedom, a revolutionary DNA technique would finally put a name and face to the faceless terror, revealing a truth more shocking than anyone could have imagined. June 18, 1976, Sacramento County. A woman wakes in the dead of night to find a man standing in her bedroom doorway. The beam of a flashlight blinds her. She can't see his face, only the glint of a knife and the outline of a ski mask. Within moments, her life changes forever. This attack would be the first in a series that left Sacramento County paralyzed with fear. But what investigators didn't realize at the time was that this wasn't truly the beginning. The man they would later call the East Area Rapist had been honing his methods for years, likely starting as the Visalia Ransacker, a burglar who conducted over 100 break-ins in Central California before mysteriously disappearing. By late 1976, a disturbing pattern had emerged. The attacker didn't choose his victims randomly. He studied them, stalked them, sometimes for weeks. He knew their schedules better than they did, one detective noted. The attacker would enter neighborhoods days before an assault, learning escape routes, identifying dogs, and even hiding straps under couch cushions in preparation. But then came a twist that shocked even the most experienced investigators. He began calling potential victims beforehand. "Is Ray there?" a caller would ask. When told he had the wrong number, he'd apologize. Days or weeks later, the woman who answered would become his next victim. These weren't misdials, they were tactics to target. As the attacks kept happening, ordinary neighborhoods changed overnight. People rushed to buy guns. Neighbors united together for nightly patrols, clutching baseball bats and flashlights as they walked streets they once felt safe on. Neighborhoods once filled with open doors and unlocked windows became fortresses. Meanwhile, police found themselves chasing mere shadows. Despite massive task forces, roadblocks, and undercover operations, the rapist continued his reign of terror. In one shocking turn, he attacked a victim despite knowing a town hall meeting about his crimes was happening that very night. A meeting attended by the victim's husband. By 1978, the East Area Rapist had attacked over 30 women in Sacramento County alone, but his methods were evolving in a disturbing direction that would blindside investigators completely. He was learning to kill. Just when Sacramento thought they might catch him, the attacks suddenly stopped. Police wondered if their manhunt had finally scared him off or if he'd been arrested for another crime. The truth was far worse. He hadn't stopped, he'd moved. October 1, 1979. Goleta, a quiet suburb near Santa Barbara. Dr. Robert Offerman and his girlfriend Deborah Manning are found dead in Offerman's condo, both bound, both shot multiple times. A strange detail catches the detective's attention: dishes of ice cream left on the counter half-eaten. The killer had forced them to eat while he watched. No one connected these murders to the Sacramento Rapist, not yet. Different counties, different police departments, and no computers to share information across jurisdictions. This communication gap gave him the perfect cover. By 1980, a terrifying new pattern emerged in Southern California. The attacker now targeted couples. He would tie up both victims, take the woman to another room, then return to beat or kill the man. For some mysterious reason, he'd started leaving behind signs of eating their food during the attacks. In March 1980, he murdered Charlene and Lyman Smith in Ventura. 3 months later, Keith and Patrice Harrington in Dana Point. Then Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez in Golta. Detectives were baffled by his ability to vanish. In one attack, a witness saw him biking away. Police set up roadblocks for miles. Somehow he still escaped. What nobody knew was that the man they hunted had once been one of them. He knew exactly how police work was done, because he'd done it himself. May 5, 1986. 18-year-old Janelle Cruz is found beaten to death in her Irvine home. The familiar signs are there, the careful entry, the bindings, the brutality. What investigators don't realize is that this would be the Golden State Killer's final known victim. And then, nothing. The phone calls stopped. The break-ins ceased. The murders ended. As months turned to years and years to decades, the case files gathered dust. Some detectives retired, others died. The victims tried to rebuild shattered lives. But the shadow of what happened lingered over California like a persistent fog. Larry Poole, a cold case investigator with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, stared at boxes filled with thousands of pages of reports. It was 1997, more than a decade after the last known attack. Poole was determined to link the Southern California murders to the Northern California rapes despite skepticism from colleagues. "Everyone thought I was crazy," Poole would later recall. But the similarities were undeniable. Every promising lead evaporated. A convict resembling the composite sketch died in prison. DNA tests cleared him. Another suspect was ruled out through fingerprints. Hair samples collected in the 70s proved useless. For the survivors, life was a constant battle. Many moved dozens of times, unable to feel safe in their own homes. Some slept with weapons, others with lights on. All of them watched the shadows. By 2010, most people had forgotten about the East Area rapist and the original Night Stalker, but a small group of detectives wouldn't let the case die. They just needed someone to bring the right kind of attention to it. Michelle McNamara, not a detective, not a forensic analyst, a crime writer with an obsession. In 2011, while researching unsolved crimes for her blog True Crime Diary, McNamara stumbled upon the case files of the East Area rapist original Night Stalker. What began as curiosity quickly consumed her life. "There's a scream permanently lodged in my throat now," she wrote about her growing fixation with the case. McNamara dug through dusty boxes of evidence, interviewed survivors, and connected with retired detectives. She even gained access to police files that had been sealed for decades. It was McNamara who gave him the name that would finally stick, the Golden State Killer. Her husband, comedian Patton Oswalt, would later describe finding her at 3 a.m. hunched over crime scene photos at their kitchen table. "I'm going to find him," she'd say, barely looking up. McNamara's research turned into a major article for Los Angeles magazine in 2013. The public's interest in the forgotten monster surged. HBO announced a documentary. Her book deal followed. The case was breathing again, then came a cruel twist of fate. On April 21, 2016, McNamara died in her sleep from an undiagnosed heart condition combined with medication effects. She was 46 years old. Her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, remained unfinished. Oswalt gathered her research notes and enlisted help to complete her work. The book was published posthumously in February 2018, becoming an instant bestseller. What McNamara couldn't have known was that justice was already closing in, through a method so new it barely existed when she began her search. While Michelle McNamara's book climbed bestseller lists in early 2018, a small team of investigators had already begun an unprecedented hunt using tools that seemed like science fiction just years earlier. Paul Holes, a cold case investigator who'd spent 24 years on the Golden State Killer case, had a radical idea. What if they took the killer's DNA and plugged it into a genealogy website? The kind people use to find distant relatives. In April 2018, the team uploaded the killer's DNA profile to GED Match, a public database where people voluntarily share their genetic information. Within hours, they had matches, not to the killer himself, but to his distant relatives. It was like suddenly having a map when you've been lost for decades, Holes would later say. Investigators built sprawling family trees tracing connections through great-grandparents and distant cousins. The trees merged on one branch. Narrowing further, they identified potential suspects. One name stood out: Joseph James DeAngelo, a 72-year-old man living in Citrus Heights, a suburb of Sacramento, just miles from where the attacks began. DeAngelo had no criminal record. He lived in an ordinary house on a quiet street, but something about him caught the investigators' attention. He had been a police officer in the 1970s working in Auburn, near where many of the rapes occurred. A team began surveillance. They collected a discarded soda can from his trash, then a used tissue from his car door handle. The DNA was tested, and it matched. This discovery stunned even veteran detectives. The monster who had terrorized California had been one of their own, a police officer who used his training to commit perfect crimes and escape capture, a man who understood police procedures because he had helped create them. On April 24, 2018, as DeAngelo backed his car out of his garage, officers swarmed in. The Golden State Killer's reign was finally over. When police arrested Joseph James DeAngelo outside his home, they didn't find the terrifying predator of the 1970s. Instead, they encountered a frail, 72-year-old grandfather who pretended to be weak and confused. "I have a roast in the oven," he told officers as they handcuffed him. At a quickly arranged press conference, Sacramento District Attorney Anne-Marie Schubert announced the arrest. Survivors and victims' family members, some who had waited over 40 years for this moment, wept openly as cameras flashed. DeAngelo's first court appearance shocked many. Confined to a wheelchair, appearing thin and weak, he barely resembled the athletic young man who had scaled rooftops and outrun police cordons decades earlier. But investigators noted something. When alone in his cell, DeAngelo moved with surprising agility, dropping the frail act when he thought no one was watching. In June 2020, faced with overwhelming DNA evidence and seeking to avoid the death penalty, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. He also admitted to dozens of rapes and burglaries that couldn't be charged due to the statute of limitations. The sentencing hearing in August 2020 gave survivors their chance to speak directly to the man who had terrorized them. For 3 days, they described shattered lives, decades of nightmares, and relationships destroyed by trauma. One survivor looked directly at DeAngelo and declared, "The devil can keep you company in your prison cell." On August 21, 2020, the judge sentenced DeAngelo to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was wheeled out of the courtroom for the last time, the Golden State Killer's reign of terror was officially over. Not with a scream, but with the quiet click of a prison door. As Joseph James DeAngelo spends his remaining years behind bars, his case sends a warning to killers everywhere. Science is catching up to your darkest secrets. What do you think should be the right punishment for such an evil being? Also, which notorious cold case do you think we should unravel next? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to uncover more cold cases which remained a mystery for years, but couldn't be kept hidden forever. Because the truth always finds a way out of the shadows.